Welcome back. Quiet for the markets, but lots of individual stocks are actually active in the mid-cap space. So Texmaco has seen huge volumes today. That's up close to about 20-odd%. TV18, Network 18, with the standard disclosure that they own the channel that we're speaking on. Both those stocks are fairly active. And in general, many high beta names like S. Kumar's, Delta Corp, these are the stocks which are looking quite sprightly in today's trade. And both United Breweries and United Spirits as well is holding up. And in telecom, it's only Idea which has managed to spike up, but Arcom and Bharti Airtel continue to remain weak. But in the next few minutes, we will be addressing all the personal finance queries. Harsh Roongta of apnapaisa.com is our expert for the day. But Harsh, the first rule of financial planning, everyone says, is fixing the goals. But what a lot of people don't take into account while fixing this goal is inflation. So when you actually calculate the returns, especially in life insurance or maybe in real estate, what's the best way to account for inflation? Because that is, suddenly turning out to be a key determinant with inflation trending at 10%.
So I think this issue of not taking inflation into account is something that affects both your goals and the way you calculate your returns. So I mean, people say normally plan for their child's education, and they say, let's assume your child is 4 years old, and if you was to go for an education course today, say it would cost 20 lakhs. Now since you need this money 14 years later, you can't just plan to accumulate 20 lakhs. Even assuming a 10% kind of an inflation in education costs, that cost is going to climb up close to about 76 odd lakhs. So you need to plan for 76 lakhs. Otherwise, you're going to not be able to fulfill that goal probably. So that is one big, I think, error that most people make.
But what is the thumb rule for accounting for inflation? Do you take today's inflation, annual inflation rate? How will you discount inflation?
So I think typically you have to take an estimate, and it could be different for different kinds of costs. So when I'm estimating education costs, it could probably be a little higher than the general inflation. Typically for our clients, we like to take about 8%, but if you take specific costs like say medical costs or inflation or education costs, it could be around 10%. And so I think really estimating that, you could go a little wrong in the actual inflation, but the very fact of including inflation will make sure that you don't go hugely wrong.
Okay. Well, let's take a break on that note, Harsh. We have a lot of viewers lined up with questions on this issue and others. Back in a minute. Right, before going into the break, we were discussing with Harsh Roongta, a personal finance expert, about how to account for inflation while making our financial goals, whether it is planning for a child's education, planning for a home, or indeed even planning for retirement. Now we have some viewers with questions. The first caller is from Chandigarh. Rishi Thakur calls us. Rishi, go ahead, your question.
Hi Lata, how are you?
Hi.
Actually, my question was related to my daughter Samra, who's currently 4 years old. Basically, I had decided to set aside around 20 lakh rupees for when she turns 19 and she has to go to college. But yeah, I had not accounted for inflation. So now I have gathered around 2 lakhs so far. She's 4 years old right now. And by investing in a combination of mutual funds and savings.
Okay.
So now how can I rejig my investment plan to account for inflation?
Fair enough. So your annual saving amount is how much? How much can you invest?
It's around 1,50,000 now, but I expect to get some increments over the period.
All right. So perhaps we can go with an increment over there, an incremental increment over there as well. Go ahead, Harsh. How would you advise them?
So I think the good news, Rishi, is that I think even if you take say roughly about 8% inflation, that 20 lakh figure in about 15 years of time is about 64 lakhs. Given the fact that you already have 2 lakhs, I presume they are primarily in equity. If not, I think over a period of time you should move it into good large cap equity funds. You need to review your existing portfolio and keep that balance 10% in a good debt instrument. I would recommend PPF given that the value is not very high here. For the balance, typically if you do a 7,500 rupee investment every month, out of which roughly about 6,700 you put in a large cap equity fund, and the balance about 800 in a PPF every month, I think that should take you through, at least as far as this goal is concerned. I would think that you would also need to do an overall planning, but at least as far as your as far as Samra's education is concerned, I think that should be quite sufficient. The funds that I would recommend could be Franklin India Blue Chip or HDFC Equity. I would suggest do just one of them, because you can do the others in some of the other goals that you would have.
All right. Thanks a lot, Harsh, as well as Rishi, for joining us. But I think one of the astounding things that you must have seen in that note is that what is 20 lakh in terms of educational requirement now would be 63.4 lakhs.
At 8%.
Yeah, at an 8% increase. So that's the kind of price that education will claim in a couple of decades. Mind-boggling figures will crop up if you think of the future in terms of inflation. Let's take a break on that note. Remember that on our Personal Finance Corner tomorrow,